Hi everyone, I'm Nabil Hannan, Field CISO at NetSPI, and this is Agent of Influence. So today we have with us Dave Edminster from EVOTEK. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
As we get started, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are today professionally?
Yeah, so I am the practice director of cybersecurity services at EVOTEK. That means that my team is responsible for delivery in cybersecurity architecture, cybersecurity engineering, and we also do, within my practice, executive advisory components. We do have other practices that focus on that within EVOTEK. So I'm post-sales delivery is what I'm responsible for.
So given what you do on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure it's no surprise to you that people often view security as a cost center. So what advice do you have for people on how they should think about security as a whole? And more importantly, is there any guidance you have on how to reframe that perception that's there today?
Yeah, it's always a challenge when leadership sees cybersecurity as a place where money disappears, and what's the benefit it's bringing. So we've all known it for many years that prevention is going to be more successful and more cost savings, more cost effective is a preventative form than it is after the fact. So we talk a fair amount about pre-incident, pre-cybersecurity incident versus post-incident. It's going to be a 10x cost increase at minimum, for an event after the fact. If you are preventing it, it's going to be far more cost savings. Now that's easy to talk about, but it doesn't necessarily resonate with leadership all the time, because you'll have leadership that will sometimes ask, where's our money going? What are we spending it on? And there's a lot of narratives you can take, but I do like eventually getting to the point where a successful cybersecurity program is keeping your name out of the news. And that seems to start to resonate with leaders, where you understand that getting in the news for a bad reason is terrible. The optics are awful. Cybersecurity is one of the ways you help prevent that, not to mention actually preventing the loss of data, not preventing a breach and all the money that might go with it.
So with that being said, and the perception of security being a cost center for many even today, are there things other than just let's say the reputational damage itself that you can have from a data breach? Are there other things that you think people are doing well today to basically build software, hardware, and processes for businesses in a way that are just naturally more resilient to security issues?
I think to a point, I think a lot of the industry is converging in ways. So there's obviously API integration and technology integrations, acquisitions are affecting that. There's far fewer tools today that are standalone and just do their one job and don't talk to anything else. I mean, with the advent of SIM, SOAR, SIAM, and everything related to it, everything's got to talk together. So I think that's a convergent story where the technologies and the processes all need to work together better and have. And that actually can result in an increase in efficiency, an increase in effectiveness, and can be a reduction in cost if an entity is looking at that big picture and rationalizing those tools. I think that's that, for lack of a better word, synergy that can come in there. And that informs the programs too. I think that's where you start to see infrastructure teams and security teams and maybe data analytics teams, depending on what's going on in the client environment. They need to start working together and not being so siloed. I think the tools can help inform that. The processes can. And then, everybody, ideally, it's a better together story. It's not we're all going independently and fighting each other.
There's also this perception that security teams are always the team that comes and says no.
Yeah.
And they're often treated as just a blocker instead of a business enabler. What are some strategies you've seen work well to change that particular perception, not just it being a cost center, but changing the perception of security always being a roadblock? And are there certain techniques that you typically recommend people to start with, given your experience in doing so?
Yeah, well, I think you can start in several different ways, but I like it when you can actually start to break down those silos and barriers between teams. One, we have to actively work to change the perception and change the internal monologue about security being the department of no. It's got to be the department of no, I can't do what you're asking. Tell me what you're trying to do. So it has to become an enabler. So if you're talking to leadership, I think it's really key to let leadership know, if you're in a cybersecurity role, that you don't see it as the department of no. You see it as an enabler. This is the department that has to help us all work together. And I like to say from a leadership perspective, I like to say we can't be the reason business doesn't function. We can't. So I find leadership tends to resonate with that messaging. And you've got to really walk the talk then and talk to the other teams. Go to infrastructure, go to those other teams and work proactively with them, not just get a change request and say no and then send it back. Mature your team members into giving meaningful responses. It can't just be no and we're done. It can be, I can't do what you're asking. Please tell me more about what's going on and I can try to help you find a solution that will work.
So there's a trend I'm starting to see in the industry around security teams, and it's around how they're naming themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to move away from naming of the team that often seems very harsh, like offensive security team.
Right.
It often comes off as very aggressive in nature. And I'm seeing more and more teams renaming themselves to something like the proactive security team.
Yeah.
So curious from you, how much of an impact do you think just renaming and repositioning what your function does has on an overall organization, especially from a culture perspective?
I think it can be helpful, but it's got to be thematically true for everybody in the role. It can't just be we're now the Department of Success or the Department of Unicorns. It's got to be everybody has to buy into this, and you've got to actually, as a leader, you've got to make sure everyone understands that we're going to be the enabler here, and that means you've got to be proactive with working with other teams. I think to kind of go, this actually loops back to what we were talking about earlier too, that there are no technical roles now that are just someone sitting in a basement at a desk doing a job, not working with a machine, or if you will, not working with people. They're all people jobs. And so I think maturing our own team members to understand that and proactively work in a cooperative way is key. And I think that goes back to the thematic change. If you're going to change from, say, the Department of Cybersecurity to the Department of Enabling Cyber Success, you've got to have everybody walking that same talk.
So there are two competing forces when it comes to thinking about security. I believe the core belief people have is if you focus too much on security, maybe you're limiting yourself from innovating and being able to be more nimble and agile in what you're doing. What recommendation do you have for people on how they should think about that challenge of two completely opposing concepts?
Yeah.
And second of all, how do you think we can enable organizations to both innovate while staying secure?
Yeah, I think it's a better together story. If we're talking, say, application development, that tends to be done in its own world, getting an application functioning, and then security becomes an after the fact when there's a finding, a scan, a pen test, a vulnerability or something. And then the security team should be working with the developers to fix that. And we all know that developers they're not measured by fixing vulnerabilities. They're measured by features and getting those features out the door. So they're absolutely in conflict. I think it's helpful if you can get involved in the conversation earlier, so you can educate that developer or developers, have some knowledge yourself from the cyber side, like how is this going to impact your workflow? If we can do the shift left in an effective way early, it should reduce friction. It should actually make their job easier. And I think if we communicate that to them as a developer or a team, you're saying, hey, if I'm involved early enough here, we can avoid some landmines right away. So you're not talking to my team later, months later, going, why am I trying to fix this thing? I just need this program to work. I think that's true of any infrastructure, any application, I said that, but any of those functional components of the business, like talking with cybersecurity proactively, cooperatively. Again, I want to go back to it can't be the Department of No, it has to be the Department of No but.
So a common thing I've been talking to a lot of people about is the concept that if you're a business that is being successful and is also secure while you're being successful at what you're doing, often there's nothing to show for you the success of your security efforts. You can make a lot of investments in security, but your success in a way is almost invisible.
Right.
When you're doing things correctly, nothing happens. There's no actual tangible thing you can show and say, oh, because of my cybersecurity investments, I have these new features that are also enabled, or these new things that I'm able to do faster. It's more because I'm secure, nothing happened. And that's why we didn't end up in the front page of the news, or we didn't have our data breached. or we didn't have our customers compromised somehow. So with that being a challenge, what are some ways you believe are effective, or what are some effective ways to communicate the actual value from the security investments you're making to the different stakeholders?
Yeah. A large part of it, I think, we go back to the optics discussion again. We're not in the news. We don't have our data going out somewhere. We don't have a regulatory component. If we talk, say, worst case scenario, ransomwares, the money involved is tremendous. The outage is tremendous. The data leakage is tremendous. And then you're reminding leadership at times that if you're a publicly traded company, this is going to affect your SEC filing. This is going to be something you will have to report. It's going to be something that insurance is going to impact by. So it's this whole snowball effect that if I'm cybersecurity, if we're cybersecurity and we're doing it well, it's avoiding all of those financial impacts, those optics impacts. And I mean, if we're going to be blunt, there are some people who may lose jobs over a breach of significant enough size. So there's individuals that will have skin in the game. Additionally, depending on what rank they're at within the C-suite, they can be held personally accountable for a number of these things now, in terms of how the federal government has looked at some breaches. If they declare it, say, gross negligent on the part of a CISO or someone along those lines, there are some CISOs that are in jail today because of those kind of findings, those kind of results. So I think it's that, again, there's money always talks. But there's a big part that it's like, hey, individually, you have skin in the game. And ideally, you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. You're protecting your own user base. You're protecting your customers, is that you don't want their data being leaked. And that's something I think we should always look at, is that there are lives that are being affected by these cybersecurity incidents, that it's more than just the money. Is somebody going to lose a mortgage over this? Is somebody going to have a record or personal information or identity theft as a result of these things? I think we need to be good stewards with all the data we have, both for our own employees, but for our customers too.
Are there any specific practices you've seen where it's very effective in communicating that specific non-financial loss or damage, and how to articulate that effectively to different types of C-level executives or board members?
Yeah, I think it depends on the audience you're speaking with, but telling them of the legal findings at times and saying, hey, these people have been found personally responsible for some of this. They've been personally fined for some of this. So that starts to get people's attention. Something else that I find, if you're trying to move into a culture of security within an organization from top to bottom and having everybody be aware of cybersecurity, I've seen a number of times now where individuals, employees have lost paychecks because of a breach of some sort, any number of ways that goes about. But that's interestingly, that was something that I found that's what got people to pay more attention, is they had skin in the game. This is, you could personally lose a paycheck or two. And depending on the nature of the breach and the state that you're in, your employer may not be required to make that right, depending on how it went. So I've seen a couple of times where someone has lost a paycheck and the employer made it right, even though the employer was not the one that was responsible for the breach per se. And then that same person lost another paycheck, and the second time the employer did not pay them. So they're out. And that got their attention very quickly. That was the moment that those team members were attending training. They were listening to cybersecurity. They were taking it personally because they now personally have skin in the game. And it's not just the business will take care of this. This is a corporate problem. No, this is a personal problem.
If I can extend that a little bit, I would love to get your perspective on how many people often think of cyber insurance as being what's going to protect them in the case they have a breach.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that type of a point of view, and how do you foresee, or how do you envision the role that cyber insurance plays as part of the cybersecurity strategy?
Yeah, well, it's a must-have for one, because everybody is at risk for an event of some sort. So this is another protective layer. But we always have to remind everyone, insurance is not there to prevent something from happening of any kind of type. Insurance is there to try to restore things after an event has occurred, be it auto insurance or home insurance or what have you. So cyber is no different. It helps you bring things back to an operational state somehow. It doesn't undo the damage. And so it's not, again, not a preventative barrier. It's a necessary function. But I think a lot of organizations, if they haven't gone through tabletop exercises to understand what a breach could be like, what invokes insurance, when does it come into play. The moment cybersecurity insurance is involved, the entire game changes, and now the organization has to focus on trying to restore services if they have an outage, and they also have to preserve evidence. So if you've got systems that have been breached or evidence of breach, you actually, from a cybersecurity perspective and a legal perspective, can't necessarily restore those. You need to keep them in the state they were in when the breach occurred. So there's an additional cost multiplier that, hey, if you need an organization to get back up to operational fast, you may be rebuying all new infrastructure to do that, to bring this up, while cybersecurity insurance is investigating the nature of the breach. Because their job is to find out what happened and what are they liable for from a cost perspective. So you end up with this interesting part where I think leadership thinks in some organizations we can just invoke cybersecurity insurance, they'll pay ransom or they'll pay us and we'll get back up and operational while we're doing this. No, it's like everything goes on pause for a while. So can your business keep operating while cybersecurity insurance is pausing your business? That's a real struggle I think most organizations are unaware of until they have either had to go through it or they've worked with a partner and actually gone through these exercises to understand and prepare and build a run book for this.
I think another piece there that people often overlook is your cyber insurance premium and coverage has a limit.
It does.
So the damage itself may exceed whatever limit you have of your cyber insurance coverage. So you may still have challenges beyond once the even if, let's assume the cyber insurance company pays out your claim, there may be still loss and damages that you have to deal with because it wasn't covered in the limit of the claim itself.
Exactly. Yeah, and we all know those premiums are likely to go up, even if nothing has happened. And if you have had an incident, they're definitely going to go up. And there are some cases where an insurer will go through the process, pay out, like you're saying, and then we'll drop coverage. They'll say, all right, we've had it. We're no longer going to cover you. You need to go find new insurance. And in a rare few cases, I can think of one some years ago where the insurer just opted not to pay. They said, yeah, you're invoking it, and that's within your right. We're going to deny the claim, and you can go ahead and sue us, was their approach. And it was just, I think that also can be a framing moment for leadership to understand that you're not guaranteed to get, just like you're saying, all the money that it is required for this incident. And you may not get any if they're going to just say, yeah, we think it's a better choice for us if you just sue us.
So if we shift perspective a little bit, organizations are making all these different investments, whether it be cyber insurance, security operations, EDR, MDR, and all these technologies to help have a more holistic cybersecurity initiative. What are some methods you've seen work effectively when trying to demonstrate the ROI of the security investments that are being made? And I know it's a hard question to answer because it is really depends on the situation.
Yeah.
But I would love to know from you if there are certain things you've seen that have been used very effectively to show the return on investment for security.
I think a lot of it can be the consolidation because there's typically been sprawl of tools. So if you can invest wisely and continue to reinvest, because no organization can sit statically. There is no done with cybersecurity. It's always a moving target. So how do we go further? How do we do more with less? How do we improve efficiencies? That's always going to be a good talking point. But it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning about optics, about we've been successful and haven't been in the news. That's itself an ROI. And I will always go back to ransomware incidents when they occur, because those are going to be 15, 20, 25x the cost. The prevention is always going to be less costly than an incident. So it's, if we're going to use analogies, I might use medical as one. It's like if you can prevent cancer, it's going to be a better life experience for you, and it's probably going to cost you less than if you let cancer grow to something terminal and have to deal with it then, and it may still not work.
Are there things you see people try to use as an ROI, but it's actually maybe giving them a false sense of security?
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not really thinking of the metrics in the right context?
Yeah, we see, and I've seen in my career, what we kind of call blinking light syndrome. the newest, latest, greatest, something that's flashing and interesting, and then a leader or a cybersecurity individual may say, I want that tool. And it may be a great tool, but if it's not something that's integrating with the other tools in your stack, or it's not rationalized, how useful is that tool? Are you just spending money on a tool that's not doing what you need? Did you buy too much of a tool? You don't necessarily need the giant, biggest, latest, greatest tool if you're not using 90% of what it can do, or you don't need it. So why spend that much money on it? Find the right tool for the job. Find the right tool for the client ecosystem, for your ecosystem. And then go through a tools rationalization. See where you've got gaps, but see where you've got overlaps, especially if it's in an area that's got mergers and acquisitions, because you've probably inherited some technology that's being used somewhere that overlaps with something else.
Is there a shift you're seeing today? Because I'm seeing this type of shift, but I'm curious what your experience has been, where I'm recognizing that some of the best security leaders are actually best at what they do, not necessarily for their deep technical prowess, but more because of how effective they are at communicating and marketing both themselves and the program that they're building and what their team is doing.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what you're seeing out there and any guidance for people who are going into new CISO roles and executive roles running security initiatives, how they should approach getting started.
Yeah, I agree with that. In my own career path, it's moved from a deeply technical role to something that's more athletic, if you will, instead of being, and I see this in a lot of areas, instead of somebody who's a really deep subject matter expert in one area, we like athletes, someone who has done a fair amount in lots of different technical disciplines, because they can stitch together the bigger picture and see how this interacts. They're the kind of team members that will often engage quickly. They're like, yeah, I don't know that technology specifically, but we can pick it up and run with it and learn. But it's also then the communication part, because I think this has been true in IT and security for years and grows that way, is you've got to be able to communicate to people, be it either people submitting tickets and requests, but C-level and leadership and boards, because you've got to help them understand what's going on in the ecosystem and why it matters. And if we get too technical with the C-level executives, they're just going to gloss over it. You've got basically a paragraph's worth of content to talk to them. And if you haven't really conveyed something meaningful in that time to them that they pay attention to, it's not going to change anything. So I believe very strongly in the collaborative approach and that athletic approach from an expertise perspective. And a piece of advice I would give to anybody that's either in a leadership role or growing into a leadership role in cyber is give presentations, talk. That's something that I think is a skill that it's not focused on in the technical world, is communication, but effective communication is going to make you better at your job and better at communicating with the organization as a whole, why it's important and how to be successful, how to consolidate this concept to something digestible and get investment.
So before I let you go, a couple other off-topic items than what we've been talking about so far. The first one is, EVOTEK is a partner of NetSPI's.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about what EVOTEK is doing with NetSPI today?
Yeah, well, so my practice specifically is around cybersecurity services, but we have our other practices, which is, networking, we have data center, we have platform. And so there's areas where I think the NetSPI tool can apply to many of those. We're using it from either a discovery perspective on my team, when we can do a POC to see, what can it show from an attack surface perspective there. So that shows value from our side. My team gleans information from that, but the client also sees the valuable data that comes out of that kind of tool, and its ease of deployment is a big part of it. Anyone that's done a POC, a POV, and it takes weeks knows that if you don't get it done quick, it's going to stall. I like the fact that we can POC in a couple of days and get something meaningful. So that's something we on the EVOTEK side are doing with NetSPI.
Love it. And then my last question for you is, we like to get to know our guests and what they like to do outside of security and their day-to-day jobs. So anything you want to share about what you like to do for fun outside of your work?
Sure. So I've been involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a few years now. I actually find that it's kind of become my therapy and my meditation, because once I'm there on the mat, I don't have my phone with me. Nobody who's not in the school at that time can get a hold of me. I've got 3-4 hours where, cybersecurity and the world's crises can't interrupt me. I can just focus. But it's also kind of like, for me, a life lesson really, is that get comfortable being uncomfortable. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will definitely do that to you. Will help you understand that you can endure more than you think you can physically at times. And I've also been playing lacrosse for about the last 10 years, in both indoor and outdoor lacrosse. So I think I tend to focus on some physical activities when I'm not doing work, because it's a very different use of my mind and body when I get the chance to do that.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Certainly.
It was great having you, and hopefully we get to hang out again sometime soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.